Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process. Well, good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well today. How about you?
I'm doing great today. So far, so good this early Monday morning. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will be talking about the blue moon on Friday, July 31st, this year, 2015, and how it is a reminder to acknowledge things that are rare as opposed to the ordinary. Timing is an important part in decision-making, and being in the right place at the right time is a factor in the success of any anticipated outcome. The moon in Aquarius brings the life force into the nervous system to help attune feelings with intelligence. With the sun in Leo and the moon in Aquarius, we can balance uniqueness with the familiar, eclectic with the traditional, and see the value in it all. So, Swami, I guess my first question is, we already had a full moon this month, so does that double our efforts? Like we talked about putting the seeds in the ground, trying to make plans. Is this another opportunity for that?
Well, I would imagine. What the new moon promises, the full moon delivers. So we got a double delivery this month. So it's kind of a rare thing. But the whole thing of just seeing value, we're kind of socialized to think that things that are rare are valuable. So to make some sort of astrological event valuable enables us to maybe take action, motivate us to find some sort of window of interest to do something.
So we take the macrocosm of that, this celestial event that doesn't happen very often, and it should probably remind us that it's the little things throughout our daily lives that can be just as rare and just as special. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. But the whole thing of value, giving value to something, all of a sudden elevates importance, creates interest. There's an old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And the whole thing of moving towards what we want. So if something is valuable, then all of a sudden it becomes desirable. And to then, once you have that window of interest that you want something, that can break the inertia so that you could start to move forward towards it.
So we could probably apply that to just about everything in our daily lives. We talked a lot about motivation the last couple of shows when we were talking about doing the practices and the processes for our spiritual development. So how do you recommend that we use this time to enable us to go forward in that direction?
Well, what I try and do is I just look at the axis of Leo and Aquarius and what that's all about, because Leo is all about developing a healthy ego, and Aquarius is about the access of the benefits of a collective sense of purpose. And I really try and use the labors of Hercules to help me understand this dynamic, because in Leo, Hercules meets the Nemean lion, and the myth is all about self-mastery, which is actually the gateway to the mind. A healthy ego is a really important thing to understand, because I think a lot of people in spiritual communities today, it's all about no ego. Ego is the enemy. And you really do need a healthy sense of self. And a healthy ego is one that isn't selfish. It's not consumed by itself. That's why these images like that they use, something like a Nemean lion, something that is devouring in a community. Because it's the dynamics of all of our addictions, really, where our sense of self-mastery is completely undermined. We're controlled by forces that are beyond our scope of power. And so this concept of self-mastery is a really important gateway for human development. It's a platform. And then the whole thing of the labor in that Hercules meets when he is in Aquarius is the whole thing of the cleaning of the Augean stables. And what he does is he redirects a river and runs it right through the stables and cleans them out. And so that's an important myth when you understand Aquarius, because the first order of business is Aquarius is represented by the water bearer. And, of course, Aquarius is an air sign. So this isn't the water that we're familiar with regard to a river, but it is really the waters of life is associated with prana, the life force. And the whole thing of the concept of using the life force as like a technique or a tool to help us perform tasks, that the whole thing of the word Jesus means God's help. And to actually understand that we can actually, as we start to evolve, we can call upon this resource to help us keep our lives on course, to help us perform tasks, if that helps.
It does help. I was interested in, you were talking about the self and the Nemean lion. So I'm sorry, I just had to segue back to that. So the Nemean lion kind of represents all the things that pull us away from the spiritual path. Like, is that like our desires? Is that like our addictions and things like that? And we have to be in a place where we can resist that.
Well, actually, it's not so much a resistance as it is a redirection, because that's one of the misconceptions. I think a lot of people try and abstain from things that they are addicted to, and you will find, like when you looked at these different myths or labors in Hercules, that there's a number of them that, where we're meeting these beasts, if you will, these overpowering images. And in a lot of it, you have to have technique in order to overcome them. So the whole thing of trying to get rid of one's desire is not possible. But what we can do is we can substitute. We can desire something different. That's probably one of the things that you could learn, is that the easiest way to get out from underneath any unnecessary dependency is to substitute. But the secret to substitution is to substitute your necessary dependencies for your unnecessary dependencies. But when we do that, when all of a sudden we're desiring this life force, this void, this nothing, then everything changes for us. And now we're plugged into a resource that will support positive growth, that will enable us to lift ourselves out of this limited perspective of seeing ourselves as separate. It will allow us to expand our identity beyond the limits of self-conscious awareness. And that's a very different dynamic than just trying to abstain from things that we are using to validate ourselves. That's why in Aquarius, the whole thing of this redirecting of the river really means that we have to change the reward circuits in our brain. We have to change neurological pathways in the pattern of our body in order for us to make this. The term was called conversion. In the Old Testament, they called it a new covenant. That now you make a switch. That you switch from a human being that draws from particles or waves, now draws from this life force, these waters of life, this life force or prana that we call in yoga, the grace of God, this more subtle source of sustenance. But you have to feel connected to it. You have to change these neurological pathways. Otherwise, if you don't, the change just doesn't go deep enough. And then all you're doing is you're just abstaining from something, which is a very different dynamic than if you have replaced it and now you're indulging. Because then you have the power of prana. Now you have God's help. It's a very different dynamic than if you were trying to do it while you desired something that was visible and tangible, or something that was invisible but tangible, particles or waves.
So if I used, let's just say cigarettes, because I see it all the time, people smoking. So if I use smoking as a method to calm my nerves, or for whatever reason people use smoking for, and I want to quit. So are you saying it's not a good idea to pick up gum chewing instead as a substitution? What I want to do is turn away from anything that is tangible, and I want to turn to something else that isn't going to harm me physically, but actually put me in a sense, or put me in a position where I'm revering something that's intangible, like you say, in life force. But then how does a person who has all those chemicals in their body, because they have to get rid of all those chemicals, those addictive chemicals in their body, to be able to turn to something else? So I think that's probably my bigger question. And then I guess part two would be, isn't there something to be said for having this mental discipline just to be able to go, I don't need anything else. I'm just going to drop the cigarettes. I'm not going to pick up anything else, and that's how I'm going to quit.
Well, to try and answer your question, I think if you try and do it that way, then you're trying to do it without God's help, which means that you're trying to muscle it through, which will continue to keep your sense of self. It will inflate your sense of self. You will have an exaggerated sense of self, as opposed to if you do recognize that we are all codependent. We all have needs. But to use what you really do need, your number one need, is ideal. And one of the things that, coming back to C.S. Lewis, I love what he had said, that perfect love we know casts out fear. But so do several other things: ignorance, alcohol, passion, presumption, stupidity. It is very desirable that we should all advance to that perfection of love in which we shall fear no longer. But it is very undesirable until we have reached that stage that we should allow any inferior agent to cast out fear. And one of the reasons why that's such an important statement is because of the physics of spirituality. See, it's the like attracts like. Like you said, if I give up smoking and I take up gum chewing, it's a relatively seamless exchange. And once you've internalized it, then the gum becomes equally as satisfying because you're using something visible and tangible. You've made a substitution. But the problem with that is that you've made a lateral move. You haven't made this vertical leap, because that's the whole thing of becoming addicted to the life force. Using the life force as this symbol that I use to validate myself. See, that's one of the things that I think is of the utmost importance, is to come back to the understanding that, am I worthy of God's love? You know, have I prepared my body for the invocation of this more subtle source of sustenance? See, when you read Scripture, this relationship with the divine is a mutually exclusive relationship. The jealous God you read about in the Bible is a real dynamic. And the reason is not because God doesn't want us to have it some other way, but because of the physics of spirituality. See, like attracts like. And if we draw from things that are visible and tangible, then we will not have attention for something that's invisible and intangible. You can't get the life force into your body if it is longing for something other than the life force. That's the two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. That's why we have to purify the body. We have to prepare the body for the invocation of the life force, if that helps.
No, it's a great explanation. But I think we'll hold that thought for a moment to pause to hear a word from our sponsor. So, listeners, we will be back with you in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, a few moments ago, you were talking about preparation for the invocation of spirit, and that reminded me that I was reading last night in the book Initiation, where she talks about they have to go through this process to elevate their levels of consciousness. And granted, in this book, they're already, like, I think, a step ahead of us as far as in that level goes, but they have to do all of these things. And is that something that we should learn from, that we have to immerse ourselves daily in everything that we do with that kind of spirit and that intention in mind?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why yoga is a path of action. It's a path of knowledge. It's a path of devotion. That's why your path of action is skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise. And it's the coordination of all of these different recommendations that start to produce this change, this apotheosis, this process of us becoming something different. And as we've learned in other shows, and we've talked about in other shows, that if one little thing is off, it will undermine the whole thing. And that's one of the reasons why, these transits can be really helpful for us. And a lot of times, if you learn to read the clues, the signals, like you go through a particular transit and you're in crisis, that's a signal that I'm not using God's help. I'm not drawing from the right energy field. I'm still in the realms of suffering and decay. And so, to me, that's a call to action. That if I can recognize that I have a problem, then, of course, the next thing is trying to figure out how can I solve that problem. Now, one of the things that we're poisoned with in America is the quick fix mentality. We're socialized to think you can take a pill. Science is going to invent a pill that's going to make all of this better. And we want to believe in that. So we don't undertake all of the necessary steps. But what you find is that our Western medical model doesn't work. And so at some point you realize that it's an all or nothing venture. And so then you, again, try and find some sort of window of interest as to why would I want to do it. And when you figure out, just how easy it really is, that to become addicted to what you really do need is not only the secret to life, but it is possibly the easiest way for you to have a very successful life. And almost immediately, you talk about the quick fix, that when all of a sudden now breath becomes your party, breath becomes your beloved, breath becomes your new drug of choice, the thing that is readily available to you is now reinforcing a feeling in your body that you're happy, you're special, that you're good enough. Now, you can't get that with anything else that you substitute. Most of us who are still drawing from things that are visible and tangible, the ones that are like, well, I'm not going to give up coffee and donuts, or I'm not going to give up my wine. That's all well and good, but you're not going to be able to draw from this other source of sustenance that will give you all of this additional power. But there is this sacrifice that has to come into place. It's not something that is just going to be bestowed on you. That you are going to have to enlist strategies. But if you do it successfully, you're not abstaining. You're actually indulging. You've actually changed the reward circuits in your brain. You've changed neurological pathways so that you don't long for a Snickers bar. You are now indulging yourself in the life force. But things change because it's a different source of sustenance. Matter and mind come together with new information. We change. We become divine.
You remind me of something that I read this morning in the 365 Tao book, and the sentence says, "The essence of life shall never be known by a human being as long as that person seeks to observe life like viewer and subject." So that just reminded me that I think people go through life just living their life and not really partaking in all that is available to them.
Well, yeah, because most of us are left to our own devices, and the pattern that our body comes in with, which is actually the thing that has to be destroyed or changed, is the thing that's keeping us detached to this limited resource. And there's nothing intrinsically evil with it, but our minds are small, our feelings are reduced to insatiable cravings. we've got our back to this really important resource and we're having problems. That's just the nature of the beast. But we have so much resistance because of the physics of it. That's what we're drawn to. And then, of course, it's one of my favorite things is what von Goethe said, none are more hopelessly imprisoned than those who falsely believe that they're free. People that think indulgence in things in the physical world is their path to liberation is probably the most poisonous thing that you can align yourself with or believe in or want to believe in.
So basically, spirituality shouldn't just be a small part of our life. It should be the whole part of our life, using that to become a whole person.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, you don't go to church on Sunday and balance matter, mind, and spirit. But if you prepare your body for the invocation of the life force, then no matter where you are, you feel connected to something that's pure, powerful, and sacred. But it is facilitating a progressive cycle that you're becoming something different. That's the term apotheosis, this process of us becoming divine. But it's not a struggle. It's not something that is depriving you of life's pleasures, kind of a thing. You know, in fact, it's 180 degrees from that. You now have a different source of sustenance. You've made this conversion. Now you desire, now you love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind, which is very different than somebody who's sitting in church longing for a cup of coffee and a donut, can't wait till the sermon's over and have the donut. Or somebody next to them who can't wait to get outside and light a cigarette. It's a whole different dynamic.
You remind me of this movie I saw a long time ago. It's called Stigmata. And I think the basic theme in this movie was, at the very end of the movie, the message was, look under a rock and you will find me. Look out the window and you will find me. In other words, it was saying, just look around you. I am everywhere. And the I meaning spirit. You know, so I've always felt, even before I saw this movie, that I didn't have to go to church and go through these rituals to find God, to find spirit, that it's everywhere, it's in everything, it's everywhere. Just like in the movie, it says, look under every rock and you will find me.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing of it. It's one thing to do it intellectually. It is a completely different thing to do it experientially, and that's where the physics is. That's why all of this preparatory work must be in place in order for this union, this yoga to take place. That's why you have to purify the body. But to purify the body for the sake of living longer or looking younger is equally as problematic. It's like lighting a torch and closing your eyes. You've created an opportunity, but you're not taking advantage of it.
Well, great. Thank you. A great show this morning. So I think it's about time to close down our program. So I invite you listeners once again to visit our website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter, of course, Facebook. And don't forget, we also have the online classes that you can access through the website. Just click on online classes, and it will take you to Powwow, and you can make your selections from there. And please also be sure to share our posts. And I invite you all for our Theory classes this week, especially Thursday night at 7 is our Theory 2. And be sure to join us next week, next Monday, our new day and time at 7. Our show will be Freedom from Fear by Union with the Divine. Sounds great. Swami, any final thoughts?
Well, I'd just like to wish everybody a good day and namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day.